notice how the speakers who make the biggest impact aren't afraid to be a little bit polarizing? On today's show, we're diving into the art and risk of committing to a unique presentation style, even when it rubs a few people the wrong way. And we've got a seasoned speaker who's faced some of the toughest rooms out there, including the famously discerning Vistage audience, to share what he's learned about standing firm in your style without losing the entire audience. You ready? Let's go. Let me tell you about today's guest, Mark Parrott. He's a 36-year financial services grizzled vet. He's presented to over 20,000 companies, and he's the author of Metatrends and The Next Economy, Amazon's highest-rated econometrics book. I'm going to let him take it from here because he'll do a better job of telling you his journey than I will. Welcome to the show, Mark, and the floor is yours.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks for having me. And I do. You missed one thing in my bio is I'm a former protege of yours. So I don't know if you remember this, but it was probably 30 years ago. I remember your presentation. You asked a whole group what car they drove and why they drove that car. And someone said BMW and what have you, or something like that. And you said, why do you drive it? It's like, because I like it or something like that. And you were like, absolutely. That's the reason why you buy it. You were so animated. It was completely enrolling. And then you were nice enough to actually coach me on how to write books and things like that. And now, if I may, I actually have 5 books
Oh,
and I'm able to crank them out really quick now. So in fact, the latest one I'm working on is a book with Michael Alasso. He's the #1 speaker in the entire Vistage system. So he's kind of the king, and the rest of us are players in the court. But the idea is that so that's going to be a book on leadership. So what are the lessons from his side of the world? What are the lessons from my side of the world? Where the credibility comes in for me is really about that I've studied Vistage members for the last 17 years. So I've presented to 27,000 companies. It's totaling 2.2 trillion in revenue with about 19 million employees represented by them. And what it comes down to, and the reason why I do it, is because through commerce, we are capable of what religion hopes to accomplish and what politicians fail at. And there are some challenges out there, and there's some massive opportunities. So I'm curious where this conversation is going to go, but I'm psyched for it.
well, by the way, I do remember having those talks with you, and I do remember you wanting to write a book. But what makes you unique and special is not everybody listens to what I tell them. So it's not like everybody comes out with 5 books. And I'm going to thank you because actually some years ago you got me into the Vistage system. And I don't do a ton of them, but I go out every now and then, and I always enjoy them when I do because I think they're about the toughest talks you can give.
Well said. Well
Yeah.
said.
And folks
Like,
don't know Vistage. You have to understand one of the reasons, and you're the pro at this, but I got an eye-opening look at it was normally I just speak to Toyota or I'll just speak to GE. And everybody's kind of pulling the rope at the same length, the same way. You go up into Vistage, you got small and mid-level CEOs from multiple companies, and everybody wants the message aimed directly at them.
that's
It's
correct.
tough.
It is tough. In fact, I'm one of only three right now that have been a chair, a member, and a speaker. So it kind of gives me a unique perspective. And one of us has been a chair, member, speaker, and corporate.
Right.
I don't think I'm ever going to do that. But the idea is, I can sympathize with the chair, but really sympathize with the speakers. Because
Right.
what happens is like in my financial planning practice, I have a half a dozen or so stand-up comedians, like famous ones. And they told me that when they first got started, what they would do is they would go on tour and literally make $50 a night that didn't even pay for their gas money. They would do it for about a year and they would circumnavigate the United States. And when they came back to that place a year later, they were carved out of wood. So the idea is that it's very similar that way. It's a very harsh environment. It's a high accountability space. If they do not suffer fools lightly, you need to know your stuff.
Right.
And then you walk into a keynote. Like you and I were discussing this offline. I had a not so great chair in Chicago, someone that probably shouldn't be chairing. And the group was very, very weak. It was the weakest group in all of Chicago. And the chair kept saying things out of his face like, all feedback is a gift. All feedback is a gift. And I'm like, spoken like someone who's never spoken for a Vistage group. You're gonna be kidding me. Because, half the time it's self-flagellation. The other half the time it's abuse. So the idea is, can you stand up to it? How do you handle it? I would argue probably the most powerful I've ever felt is when I've turned into vapor, when the harsh criticisms are just flying through me like arrows. And even to the point where, almost like the Matrix, on occasion, I could catch the arrow out of the air, look at it and go, he's got a point with this one, and kind of put it in my pocket and not take it personal. What I'm striving for is to be able to do that more often. So when he kept saying all feedback is a gift, it was basically a clueless statement about how tough it is to speak for Vistage. It is significantly more tough than it is to do a keynote. And
Yeah.
like, and what even a keynote for a trade association, unlike Toyota or GE, like you've done, which I think I may have done more Vistage presentations, but you've certainly done more keynotes. So it's kind of a unique conversation we can have for the speakers who are listening. So what's good about one is it makes you really tough, and then you can handle anything. Like one time I actually did a stand-up university class here on Long Island where I performed in front of stand-up comedians, which is the toughest audience you could possibly imagine. So that you're sweating bullets, you're giving them the best material you got, and I did it so I could become a better speaker. So they thought I was doing it because I wanted to be a stand-up comedian. The answer was no. I like they kept telling me like you can make it to television, you can make it. I'm like, I don't think anyone in this room is making it to television. I have to tell you guys. But the deal is that it was a nice compliment that they gave me. But the deal was is that it was so tough I could handle any other audience. It's a little like doing military training, and then you can handle more things in your life after that type of training. It makes you stronger, it makes you tougher, that type of thing.
Yeah. And I think, along with that is a sense of improv too.
Yeah,
While we're opening this up, I think
yeah.
what really happens, particularly with Vistage, because in a normal keynote for me, I want things to happen that don't always happen. But believe me, we're not going to be straying that far from the lines. And you may think we are in the audience, but I've been across this line many a time. But in Vistage, when we're talking about improv, we never know where that group may go, what kind of mood that group's in, who's been invited that doesn't normally come to the group. And as you said, the Vistage chair. And Mark, can we drop back a little bit? Because one of the struggles that I get is sometimes those intros to a keynote or a Vistage chair,
That are
which are
terrible.
sort of these lifeless kind of
Yeah. Reading from
eulogies.
a
I mean, it's my
page.
fault. I wrote it, but they're usually just copying something off of the website. And I really
Yeah.
didn't want that one read. Any
Yes. So
thoughts on how to get around that?
okay. So when I remember, so I've done about 1,000 of these now. So I'm kind of pulling back from that at the moment. I'm buying out a partner at the moment, so I'm only going down to about 30, maybe more like the ones that you do. I was doing 100 to 120 a year. So what I would say is I had to remember so many details when I would speak to the chair before the actual speaking gig. So I contact every one of them at least a week before. And then what I'll tell them is don't read my bio. Bios are boring. We don't want to start on a boring note. In fact, what I'd love you to do is if I'm speaking multiple times for you, open up with, this is Mark Parrott. Sure hope he doesn't suck like yesterday. So what it does, it completely transforms the expectations. I can't stand it when the chair actually talks about my awards or all this other type of stuff because what it does, it raises the bar of expectations. Or if they're profuse in their compliments from the day before, don't do that. All right. I prefer, and then I'll joke with the chair saying I prefer low expectations. If someone's psyched to see me, like, oh, I bought your book and I can't wait to hear you. I'm like, I cannot wait to disappoint you. Right. Because unlike your presentation, if I remember correctly, my presentation is really quite confrontational and it's controversial. I piss off a lot of people. And the reason why I'm willing to do that is because I'm a former chair and I talked to CEOs out of suicide in the financial crisis. And Rob, that sucked. It was my training did not teach me how to talk people out of suicide. It turns out I'm good at it and I don't want to be.
Right.
So what I'd much rather do is have a rough conversation with the CEO today, so we have fantastic conversations down the road. And that means I piss off people. So about 1.79% of my audiences viscerally hate my presentation and actively try to get me fired as a speaker. It happened last year from a chair, believe it or not, in Vegas. She turned to me and she said the men in that presentation yesterday, they loved your presentation. The women hated it. I said, that's not true. There was only three women in the room, and the oldest of the three in the back of the room, and I think her name was Kim, she sent me a text message saying it was the best presentation she had ever seen. I said, so there was two, herself included, the chair. So there was a young, let's a 25-year-old woman who was actively reading the book A Billion Wicked Thoughts. Are you familiar with this book?
No.
All right, so it's actually two Google data scientists, and it's the history of internet pornography. And I offended this woman. So what happens is I think there's a dangerous thing going on in the United States. I can actually almost assure you that it's the case that the university systems have surrendered their commitment to academic rigor. They are now treating their students as if they're customers. Can you see any downside negative effects of that
Oh
in the
yeah.
long term?
Oh yeah.
So it's absolutely terrible. So where is the world treating us like customers and where is it treating us like students? Where is that appropriate? So I'll turn back to the CEOs. I tell them that story. And that chair spent the better half of last year trying to get me fired as a speaker. And then when that didn't work, she called the chairs that booked me for the early part of last year to talk them out of having me speak. You can obviously recognize how concerning that is. You know, you're out there trying to do good work in the world, and people are actually accusing you of terrible things because of the good work you're doing. So what I have to teach is essentially I teach people how to predict the future more accurately. And the way I do it is through the science of human nature and evolutionary psychology. So I teach them how the CIA predicts hotbeds of violence in the world. And people essentially they want to believe beautiful lies. And I'm the person that pokes the holes in the beautiful lies.
Right.
I mean, like my wife and I were having a conversation just yesterday, and although it didn't come up in the conversation, it was that she believes that all people are truly good inside, and that's not true. All
Well, that's
people are
your
really
opinion. Like, I might lean more towards your wife. So your opinion is that that's not true. See, when I'm learning about you, let me cut in on you for a second. First
sure,
of
sure.
all, I think you're almost like the Howard Stern of speakers. You're like a shock jock. Okay.
Yes.
I don't think you mean as much of it as you say. I think you enjoy shocking those audiences a little bit. And you know what? The whole idea of this show is to bring in comedians and speakers and professionals and keynoters and workshops and trainers and people that have different styles. Your style is, I think, somewhere in there, you enjoy kind of upsetting the apple cart a little bit. Am I
So
wrong?
no, no, no. You're right about that, except one thing you mentioned there. That's not my opinion. That's Jonathan Haidt's opinion and Steven Pinker's opinion.
Okay.
So what I do is when I'm flying, I actually do a massive amount of reading. And then what I'll do is I'll underline, like the best book I've ever read, I've read it 7 times and I've rewritten it longhand and pen 5 times. I want to know the material in the book better than the author does. So now what happens is, now this kind of pre-COVID, maybe pre-59 years old, if a CEO is challenging me on a fact, I would tell him which book and what page to turn to. Who is actually the study of it? Like I'll give you an example. Two PhDs, Genskow and Shapiro, have figured out how to actually tell how far left or right a newspaper leans based on politically charged words. So now we all had a sense that, like, let's say the New York Times leaned left. So they actually figured out how far left through quantitative analysis. So they studied Congress for 2 years to see what are politically charged words, and then developed an algorithm to test out all these politically charged words in every publication in the history of the United States. So they can tell you how far left or right a publication leans. So when I say things like, well, it's like this, if they challenge me, then I'll bring up the PhD, I'll bring up the person's name, I'll bring up who you need to focus on, which books you need to read, because it is such a harsh audience. So
Yeah.
what ends up happening is as soon as I do that 3 or 4 times, the audience kind of backs off and they realize I'm better researched than they are.
Right.
And we also have a discussion up front. What is research? What isn't? I can tell you, sitting down to watch Fox News with a scotch in your hand is not research.
Right.
Sitting down at night to watch MSNBC with a scotch in your hand is not research. Now, they all crack up over that one. I said, so what we have to do is actually do research. And the majority of all CEOs can't afford the time. And then they're missing out on some massive opportunities. So what I do is I tie back human nature to how that creates extreme valuation exits for CEOs who want to sell. So and I was able to crack the code on what creates extreme valuation in the era of Sarbanes-Oxley. So it's eggheaded stuff. And
Right.
when my audiences are like, the legitimate complaint they give me, it's like drinking from a fire hose. And that is true. Partially, I don't know if I'm ever going to see them again.
Well, let
So what
me
I
let
do
me
is,
break in on you. Okay. All
sure,
right.
sure.
I want to you put a lot out there. Let's just talk
Yeah,
about the fire hose. All right.
sure, sure.
I'm because I'm really curious. You're out there and you're talking about the financial markets, right?
Yeah,
Okay. Well, you could spend a week and a half talking about that, but you've got
yeah,
about 3 hours. My
yeah.
guess is you're not just talking faster. You're trying to figure out how to take complex and make it a little bit clearer, but how do you balance your confidence? And I heard it in that story you told about with your wife, where she said, "Well, here's my opinion." You basically said, "Your opinion's wrong." Okay, here's the
That's
real
exactly
answer.
right.
How do you balance that confidence that you have with the honesty of the message, which is we don't really have 100% know where anything's going.
Yeah, yeah. Fair,
We're
fair.
just following data. How do you balance that?
Okay, well, when someone brings up a perfectly legitimate question like that or statement like that, I tell them what is objective truth. So when you're listening to two PhDs have a conversation, which is something I do regularly, like I really enjoy it. In fact, I'm going to be earning my PhD shortly enough. So the reason why is because I want to know that my research is up to snuff. I
Right,
want to know that like how to do it the best way possible, how to produce a academically pure article. But what you'll hear is like perfect example is there's a video on YouTube of Jonathan Haidt talking about his book, The Coddling of the American Mind. And Jonathan Haidt is a Ivy League educated psychologist that's at the cutting edge of studying what's called moral psychology. And he writes books on why we're so politically divided, why we're so divided on religion, and parenting mistakes, like overparenting children, and what's the downstream negative effect of that. He also just wrote the book, The Anxious Generation. So on his book tour, he was being interviewed at Wharton by a podcast called Knowledge at Wharton. That's Philip Tetlock. Just to give some credibility to him, not only is he a PhD, but he also won the inaugural IARPA award. Can you out CIA the CIA? So brilliant guy, and he said in an offhanded comment back to Jonathan Haidt, he said, "Well, my research suggests." That's PhD code for this is a fact as best we can muster one.
right.
But the people who are the least confident in facts are the PhDs who establish those facts. So, because science is like scotch, all the ingredients have to come together just so, but then it has to age well. That's when people say, trust the science. No, 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 no. Scientists don't trust the science. They trust science because they recognize scientists are all flawed. So what happens is if you discover something and you put it out into the ether, another PhD has an obligation to shoot holes in it. And then if they can't shoot holes in it, they have to say this passes muster. And then it becomes provisional truth. So we're not talking truth with a capital T, we're talking truth with a lowercase t, if that makes sense. And balancing my confidence and me making people wrong or right, what have you.
Yeah.
I just believe that making people right is wrong. Making people wrong is wrong. Which one's wrong depends on the circumstances. It's how do you make them win? And so what I do is I challenge them to actually um, become researchers because there's one massive opportunity we haven't discussed yet. 50% of all companies in the United States are owned by baby boomers. That means there's a gigantic fire sale that's going to happen in the next 15 years because they're either going to die, sell, or shutter. And there's a lot of employees out there that are going to be negatively affected by that. So, how do I take the leaders that I'm presenting to now, get them to raise their game? get them to stop working in the business, work on the business. Now we can go on offense. And offense starts in your wheelhouse, sales and marketing. The
Right.
sales in Vistage, the sales and marketing is the worst, the number one thing wrong in all of Vistage. So you should be speaking all the time, right?
Yeah, the
So
irony is I don't speak that much because
yeah,
they don't they seem completely detached from persuasion and influence. Even as managers, a lot of them are managing people. So it's not like we're talking about carrying a bag. We're just talking about taking your idea, putting it in the employee's brain and making them feel like they thought of it. You know, I'm trying to figure out where that scenario doesn't work for particularly a higher level individual. But no, that's for another show. Vistage is a very unique and stubborn audience. But I want to crowbar something in. You are living proof. I want everybody to hear this of a conversation I've had many times about style. You have a really unique style, and it is a no holds barred style. It's not right. It's not wrong. It's yours,
yeah,
and it is so yours that it really works for you. I'm putting this public announcement out right now because for a listener right now who's scratching their head, they were saying, that's a very strong style there. If it doesn't fit, don't. This isn't your style. You
yeah,
remember
yeah,
the story I used to tell about Ben Feldman, Mark, about the guy who sold more insurance than anybody on the planet for years and years. A quarter of a million salespeople. He was number one. Number two was two-thirds behind him. Okay.
yeah, 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 yeah.
He possessed nothing that we would normally see in a salesperson, but he was very committed to his unique style and he was a massive success. That's what I see. That's one of the messages peripherally I'm getting from you. Just having this conversation of how you are really locked into your style. I can see why 1.9% or whatever it is wants to scorch the earth. The other 98% said a breath of fresh air. We've got somebody who's just telling it like it is.
Yeah. That's almost exactly what I hear at the end of these things. So people come up and like people who have hated speakers their entire career in Vistage will come up and say, that's the best presentation I've seen ever. So what happens is that I attack those beautiful lies. And the reason why is because we're not hardwired to live in today's society. We're hardwired to exist on the periphery of the savannah in East Africa 12,000 years ago. So the reason why is because people don't pursue truth. Truth was not all that important to them when they only had like maybe 50 people around them. What was important to them is that they towed the line. And that leaves us subject to something called blue lies. Like you're probably familiar with white lies. Like
Yep.
you're my buddy, so you tell me I look good in this shirt when I don't, right? In our ancestral past, it was so important to white lie because friendship was vitally important. Like I'll turn to the hunters in the room and I'll say, who here hunts? The first hand that goes up and just say, I'm picking on you. You're the best hunter. We're gonna say I'm a hunter, but I'm not so good. But beyond a certain level of skill, hunting's really luck. So how do you create social insurance? So the first type of insurance was about scarcity. So if I got lucky and I took down an elk or whatever the big game was back in that ancestral environment, there's good cuts of meat and there's bad cuts of meat. What I would do to ensure that when I have scarcity, I have friends that actually help me is I wouldn't store that meat underground. I can't consume all of it. I would share that meat with the best hunters, especially the best cuts. I would give right to him because now he owes me. Like this shows up in a modern day that when you do some type of banquet or party or large barbecue or wedding, you and your spouse will keep track of everyone in your circle who repays that favor. We don't know it consciously, but that's how we test to see if the person's a real friend or not. It's who can you count on in dark times? So the best place to store meat pre-refrigeration was in your friend's stomach. That creates white lies. So we evolved white lies so that you and I are complementary to each other. Because I don't know where this conversation is going to go down the road. If it's going to be benefit to you, your listeners, me, my listeners, what have you. So the deal is I'm open to it because I know you're someone I can count on. You're a friend. You've done good things for me in the past to the point where I owed you favors. And even if you remember, I sent you a gift after you told me about how to write a book. I sent you, I think, a signed Len Bias jersey, if I'm remembering correctly. Yeah,
You?
yeah,
I
yeah,
know I
yeah.
have that jersey, and I look
Yep.
at it sometimes. I go, "Where did that come from?" Okay, well, that puzzle's been put together today. Keep going. But by the way, thanks for that.
Yeah,
I
welcome.
still have it.
Yeah, yeah. So the way I look at it is how can I invest in the relationships that and make it so that things are better. Let's call it the 98% that love me as opposed to the 1.79 that hate me. The what happens though is that we're not seekers of truth. What we are is we're born bad lawyers. We decide way too quickly which side of the argument we're on, and then we seek only the first evidence that proves our side of the argument correct. This should be the great emancipator of mankind. What is this really? It's an idiotic echo chamber.
Yeah, he's holding
So
up a
what?
cell phone for those who are walking the dog right now. Keep
Yeah,
going.
yeah, yeah. All right, so the idea here is the internet should be the great emancipator of mankind because at any one moment it's the sum total of human knowledge. What is it really? It's just an echo chamber. So what I'm challenging the people to do is to not suffer from what's referred to as blue lies. This comes from a study of police corruption in New York City. That's why it's called blue lies.
Mhm.
They could not get the good cops to rat on the bad cops who were corrupt because the good cops perceived silence as loyalty to the police department. And we're never going to be disloyal. That I'm loyal to my tribe. This is what giant Trump flags are on the back of pickup trucks. It's not about truth. It's about signaling which tribe they're on.
Right.
Now, before you snicker at the foolishness of giant Trump flags, so is the same thing when you put your pronouns in your social media. So it's sending a message, sending up a flag. I'm on this side. And what happens is that we're suffering from right now something called displaced religiosity. That's where we're born religious, every one of us. If you're not a practicing in a religion, there's a likelihood that you're displacing that religiosity into politics, where we're creating a new religion of national politics, where we're sacralizing our political beliefs. And I get in trouble for saying this, and this is maybe what set these two women off in Vegas. I see no difference between AOC and Marjorie Taylor Greene. I see them as two halves of the same stupid coin because they're prosecuting a false religious agenda politically and don't know it. And who's more dangerous? The person who's full of crap and knows it, or the person who's full of crap and doesn't know it. So my message around politics is to get it out of your world. So apply that religiosity appropriately to other things, like
Right.
help people with it.
Right.
Don't beat up other people because they disagree with you, or worse yet, label someone something so I never have to listen to you again. That used to be very much a thing of the right, especially back in the 60s with the civil rights movement. Oh, you're a tree hugger, you're a this lover, you're a that lover. And then they didn't have to listen to you. You're a pinko, you're a commie. Then they don't have to listen to you anymore. Now the left is very guilty of that. Oh, you're a Nazi. And frankly, the 20th century, that was a good lesson. Nazism bad. What they missed is communism worse. So what I
Yeah.
do is I teach them statistical reality and then get them to recognize 50% of all people have a below average IQ. So the
Right.
idea is you're not going to be able to move the needle on the majority of them.
All right.
So
Right. Let's. You are one interesting guest, Mark.
thank you,
I
Rob.
want to pin you down on your presentations a little more. I
Sure,
got
sure,
your
sure.
concepts, but I want to tell you some things I'm learning that, and I just want to make sure people are catching. One of them is very simple. I think the instinct for many speakers is to win the entire room. And when that 1% or 2%, and it's not always quite as, Mark, you're a bit polarizing with some of your issues.
Sure.
Sometimes they're just very minor issues. Sometimes for me, people just don't like salespeople. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
That's their issue. The knee jerk reaction is to say, well, I'm going to go get that 2%. I'm going to win them over. I can do this. That's the move. The problem is we run the risk of losing the other 98%. Yep.
Yes.
And
Yep.
so I appreciate where you are. I just want to make sure people are catching the fact that it's a strategy to not try and win every single person in a room. You'll lose the whole room. You're never going to get that 1 to 2%. And some of them don't, for me, they don't like a funny guy. They don't like a bald guy,
Yes.
whatever it is.
Yes.
They're
Yes.
never going to like it. So I can obsess on that and lose everyone, or just keep my chin up and power forward and go with what I know works and do my
Mhm.
job.
Well said, dude. So when I'm doing my keynotes, I'll bring up, I do them mainly for trade associations, not places like Toyota. I'll say, look, I'm controversial and I'm confrontational. The trade association knows that, and they went out of their way to build a safe place for people who are easily offended. And it's right outside those doors. And I point to the doors of the hall.
Hmm.
So maybe you should just get out. Now people start to applaud when I do that. And I'm like, this is one of the dirtiest secrets out there for presenters. I believe what I'm about to tell you is the new superpower of the 21st century. It's to be unoffendable. If you're unoffendable, you're open to truth. If you're easily offended, you're an idiot and you're headed for a fall. And that's on you. And then what I'll do is I'll have them add up all the employees represented by the leaders in the room. I said, that's how many people are counting on you making excellent decisions. So you putting your politics before truth is not honoring that responsibility. So those people are counting on you. And then what I'll do is I'll say to them, just to twist the fork a little bit, I'll go, so I get this right. There's 10,000 employees represented by the leaders in this room. And they'll go, yeah. I said, what about their families? What about the customers? What about the vendors? And that's what I mean by through commerce, we're capable of what religion hopes to accomplish and what politicians fail at. Just taking care of large scale communities. That's why I do what I do. That's why I'm willing to go stick my face in a fan every week and get the crap kicked out of me in Boston or Seattle, Portland, or San Francisco. It's I think those four cities in the United States are detached from reality. They're so arrogant. Boston is not worth it to fly to. It's just abuse waiting to happen. Even the outskirts in that state, the chairs will have to convince me I'm not walking into a firing squad.
The
And
views of Mark Parrott are not all held by the Presentation Whisperer show. Now back to Mark again. Okay.
yes. So, but I don't go to San Francisco. Well, I'll give you one. I'm in Portland, Oregon, and it was just absolutely terrible. And the chair could not hold back the members, right? The yelling at me and stuff. How dare you say this? How dare you say that? Crazy stuff like that, right? So I called up the chair that booked me for Seattle. And I said to him, I said, we have to cancel this. And he said, and he wrote me back a really, really thoughtful, articulate email. It was beautiful. So this is a very thoughtful man. So he said, "Are you willing to come on a Zoom with the chair who's taking over for me? Because he needs to hear this too." And I said, "Okay." So we get on the Zoom call and we're talking, and he said, "Mark, that's the reason why I'm stepping down as the chair and I'm leaving Seattle. It's because of all these things you're bringing up. It's an ideological monoculture, and he's a former Soviet citizen, and he's seeing it happen again in Seattle." He said, "That's why I'm stepping down." He said, "It's that's how divided the United States is. But part of it is like, is it worth a 6 hour flight across the country to go get your butt kicked? I don't think so. So I think personally, what the chairs have to do is take a long, hard look at what they're producing and are they creating a firing squad for speakers, and then wonder why the speakers don't want to come. In fact, what I'd like to do, if I get the time, is create a forum, a closed forum like ChairNet, where the chairs can communicate when we can't see it, where we can communicate and the chairs can't see it, so we can actually warn each other about which ones are the worst groups, which ones are the best groups to speak for, who's the best chair in the country, and maybe we have an award for that chair, that type of thing.
Right.
That make it where we can at least push back a bit, because I don't want men like you getting your ass kicked because someone is a bad chair. I don't
Right.
want that. I want
Right.
you doing the good work that you do and being rewarded for it, at least spiritually, because we both know that speaking for Vistage is not very financially rewarding.
Right. Well, for those who don't know the Vistage model, the reason why it is not very financially rewarding, reason why we do it is because we're basically making a bet. And the bet is you put 15 small to mid-level CEOs in front of me. I deliver the best presentation they've ever seen in their life. And we've got prospects. We've got a prospect pool. That's the bet. If you can't close them, then it's not the most useful amount of time that you can put into something. Put it that way.
I think in
Yeah,
my case it's slightly different.
yeah,
So there is that element. I think
right.
because you're a sales trainer, it's
Hmm.
slam dunk for you.
Hmm.
When you come from an econometrics perspective,
Yeah,
they don't want to be sold at all, zero.
right, right.
So what I've done is I've turned it into market research.
Hmm.
So I now have the largest survey of privately held CEOs probably in the world. I beat Ohio State at their own game. I beat Vistage at their own game. In fact, I've been able to track the valuation improvement as a result of being a Vistage member, and the numbers are astonishing. So I compared them to non-Vistage members, the 240,000 or so, and then I compared Vistage members to them. And over the same 10-year time period, Vistage members outperformed increases in valuation of their non-Vistage competitors by $894,104 a year.
Wow. All right,
Yeah.
Mark, I'm bringing you in for a landing. We've got some speakers that are listening, and our topic is really more about not necessarily being politically correct all the time, not worrying
Yeah.
about losing, a small percentage of the room. If we got speakers listening right now, what's one piece of advice you want them to take away from the conversation that we just had? And I want that piece of advice in 30 seconds or less. All right, so nice,
Okay.
crisp, and easy.
Okay. So the best piece of advice I can give you is that when you present for a chair and it goes well, you send them a text message complimenting them for putting together such a strong team. I don't want you to use mine, but this is what I say. I text them, a team is always a reflection of its leader. You should be quite proud. Now, if I don't like the chair, I don't send them that message. So it's not like I'm just blowing smoke up their skirt. Then when they come back and they say they're always really pleased with that because the better chairs are doubting how good they are. The worst chairs are already certain that they're great chairs and they're not as a result of it. So it's like, how do you take care of that modicum of doubt? And then you say, oh, by the way, would you be so kind as to tell ChairNet your impressions of my presentation? So two Cope Award winner chairs did that for me back to back. And I went from speaking 10 times a year to 120 times a year.
Wow. Well, there you go. You gave me just what I was looking for. I really appreciate it. How do people get a hold of you?
Well, you can turn to, well, how do they usually get a hold of me? Is they have my cell phone number. So
Not this group. This
yeah,
group's going to
yeah.
need an email or a website.
Sure, sure. Okay, my email is Mark. The last name is actually Parrott,
Yeah,
Parrott, at nexteconomy.com. And Next Economy is spelled nxteconomy.com. That's the
right.
best way to get a hold of me. In the meantime, here's what the challenge I have for you. I
Okay.
get calls from would-be speakers in Vistage all the time, and I answer those calls. But I think actually you'd be better at it than me. And the reason why is because you have more experience doing keynotes than I do. So, like, if we take the Vistage presentations versus keynotes, it's probably flipped in your case compared to me.
Right.
So it's like, is it right for them or what have you? I'd like them to steer them towards you with your permission, if that's okay.
Yes, that's okay. I don't know how many we've got coming, but sure, I'll
Oh,
be
it's
happy to
it's
talk.
it's not it's not unmanageable.
Yeah, but
So
steer them to me. That would be fine. Okay. We now to get a hold of you. I'm sticking with the Howard Stern of speakers is who we just heard from today. It's really nice to reconnect. And I always called you Mark, 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 Mark. But even I learned, like a lot of people call me Rob Joels, Rob Jollies. I got all the ways of saying it.
yeah.
Parrot.
Uh,
Even I got a little education on that one today. So thanks
well,
for helping me clean that up.
don't be embarrassed by that. That is literally the soundtrack of my life,
I
right?
can
So
imagine.
people
Yeah.
mispronouncing my
Yeah.
name, right?
Right.
So it
Joel's is
goes.
mine. That's my
Yeah, yeah.
soundtrack. All right, my man. Great seeing you again. Congratulations on your speaking success and all those books. And it's really nice to reconnect. Thrilled to have you on the show.
Okay, let's stay in touch.
You bet.
Thanks,
Well, we'll
Seth.
do it again as well as we can next time, everybody. Until then, stay safe.
Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please follow, rate, and review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen. For more resources and to connect with Rob, visit thepresentationwhisperer.com.